Everything changed in a matter of seconds. One moment, the Houston Texans are riding the incredible high of a truly remarkable turnaround. I mean, we all watched it happen, right? We witnessed C.J. Stroud's absolute meteoric rise. We saw him transform seemingly overnight from this highly touted rookie into an elite surgical field general, a guy who commands the pocket like a seasoned 10-year veteran. And on the sidelines, we saw head coach DeMeco Ryans completely reset the culture of the entire building. He took a franchise that, let's be honest, many considered a rebuilding afterthought and turned them into the absolute apex predator of the AFC South. They went from the plucky underdogs everyone loved to root for to the heavily hunted target that everyone in the league wants to take down. And then, the 2026 schedule drops, and the staggering, heavy reality of their success truly sets in. Welcome back to NFL Nexus, the absolute ultimate destination for the absolute deepest dives into the hidden strategies and untold stories of the National Football League. If you want to really understand the game behind the game, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and comment down below on what you thought. And hey, to truly support our deep dives, hit that join button and become a channel member today. Okay, let's just dive straight into this, because let me tell you, this is not just a standard schedule release. For the Houston Texans, the second half of this 2026 season is a crucible. It is a trial by fire meticulously designed to test whether this franchise is just a fleeting flash in the pan or if they are a hardened, true championship caliber juggernaut. 4. Standalone night games. All of them packed relentlessly into the second half of the year. The lights have literally never been brighter for Houston, and their margin for error, it's never been thinner. You know, when you play under those primetime lights, the entire football world is watching. But it goes so much deeper than just fans sitting on their couches with a bowl of chips. When you're the only game being broadcast on a given night, every single offensive and defensive coordinator in the league is aggressively, intensely scouting your tendencies. Advanced scouting departments are hyper-focused on your X's and O's. Every missed assignment, every tiny pre-snap tell, every slight adjustment in your coverage, it is all magnified. It's cataloged by your future opponents. It is an unforgiving, brutal environment where contenders are separated from pretenders under a massive microscope. And for Houston navigating this hyper-exposed gauntlet, it's the ultimate measuring stick of their evolution as a team. So, Section 1 here, preparing for battle, the Carolina Proving Ground. Surviving that kind of brutal, relentless spotlight, it doesn't just happen by accident. It requires a grueling groundwork that has to be laid long before the cameras roll and the national anthems are sung on primetime television. It requires preparation in the shadows. Think about it. Late August, the searing heat. The Texans aren't just staying in the comfortable, familiar, climate-controlled confines of their own Houston facilities. No way. They are taking the entire operation on the road. They're traveling to face the Carolina Panthers in joint practices right before the third preseason week. And you have to understand, this is a deliberate, highly calculating move by the coaching staff. You simply don't just run drills against your own teammates if you want to prepare for a primetime gauntlet. You need schematic friction. You need the unknown. The Panthers offer completely different defensive fronts, totally exotic pressure packages, and secondary coverages that Houston's offense simply cannot replicate in-house. Going against a completely unfamiliar unit forces that offensive line to communicate on the fly, actively testing their protection rules in a chaotic, unsanitized environment. Just listen to the psychology behind head coach DeMeco Ryans' strategy here. He said, "The main thing is we get different looks, different schemes, and we go against different players. It sparks conversation. It helps us when it comes to further down the line how we game plan." Listen, those aren't just empty coach-speak words. That is the exact blueprint for survival in the NFL. They aren't just practicing out there in Carolina. They are forging their armor. Because when the Texans inevitably face some disguised cover zero blitz on an absolutely critical 3rd and 8 in the freezing cold of December, the complex blocking conversations that the offensive line had in the sweltering Carolina heat back in August, that is exactly what will save them. They are building a vast mental database of adjustments right now, banking incredibly valuable reps against unfamiliar chaos. Moving on to Section 2, the escalation. 4 nights in the spotlight. And trust me, they are going to need every single bite of that mental data. Because what is coming is an escalation of threats that would break most rosters in this league. Now sure, the Texans faced a somewhat similar 4-game night slate in 2025, going a respectable 2-2 in the regular season, or 3-2 if you want to count their Monday Night Football wildcard victory. But 2026? Structurally and geographically, this year is a completely different beast. Just look at this chronological path of destruction laid out right before them. We start with Week 11, what we're calling the divisional trap, a high-stakes, hyper-familiar collision. Then we moved deeper into the midseason with the Steel City rematch, walking right back into the very stadium where they broke hearts just a year prior. After that, the brutal physical reality of January in the frozen tundra against a surging NFC powerhouse. And finally, the whole shebang culminates on Christmas Eve against the final boss. Honestly, just reading that list out loud creates a sense of escalating dread. Each game is progressively more demanding, geographically more hostile, and physically more punishing on a roster that, by that point, will already be heavily battered by months of NFL football.
So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding the sheer variance of these environments. On one side of the coin, you have the so-called easiest matchup of the entire primetime slate. A home game against the Indianapolis Colts, with the Colts being forced to travel on a short week. On paper, everything seems to break Houston's way. They get the pristine turf, they get the climate-controlled acoustics of NRG Stadium, and they get the comfort of sleeping in their own beds. But then, on the other side, you have the ultimate test, away, at Philadelphia, on Christmas Eve, literally in one of the most hostile territories in the history of professional sports. The contrast there is just staggering. It goes from a highly protected, manufactured home field advantage to a crushing, suffocating road climax. We're talking about stepping off a plane into the brutal sub-zero wind chills of the Northeast, playing on a rock-hard, frozen surface where every single hit feels like a car crash.
All right, level 1, the divisional trap. The Indianapolis Colts are coming to Houston in Week 11. By this point in the season, these two teams will have already battered each other in an early Week 3 contest, so there are absolutely no secrets left. And the initial DraftKings Sportsbook line is pretty striking. Houston is favored by -5.5. That is a significant, heavy number for a divisional game. It screams massive confidence in the Texans from Vegas, largely because the Colts have to travel on that brutal short week to play in Houston's building. But please do not let that number fool you. This is a high-ceiling divisional rival, and this matchup is incredibly volatile. When two teams know each other's playbooks this intimately, the sheer talent gap shrinks dramatically, and pure desperation takes over. Think about the specific threats we are dealing with here. Anthony Richardson's incredible dual-threat ceiling can break absolutely any defensive scheme. And then you have Jonathan Taylor, who possesses the exact bruising running style needed to grind the clock and keep C.J. Stroud entirely off the field. A short-week divisional game is never, ever a guaranteed victory. It is a trap waiting to be sprung if Houston loses focus or fails to set the edge in the run game for even a single drive.
Which brings us to level 2, the Steel City rematch. If they manage to survive the trap, they immediately face level 2. The Texans are traveling back to Pittsburgh, back under the night sky where they made history just months ago in the 2025 playoffs. 30-6. That was the dominant, totally silencing victory the Texans delivered on Wild Card weekend. It was a massive statement to the entire league. And let's remember exactly how they did it, right? It was a total defensive masterclass. They absolutely suffocated the Pittsburgh run game at the point of attack. They forced multiple back-breaking turnovers. They played elite, highly disciplined zone coverage and established their own relentless ground attack to effectively mute that roaring crowd. They went into one of the most storied, legendary stadiums in the NFL and dismantled the Steelers piece by piece. But history is a double-edged sword. That score isn't just a fond memory for Houston. It is an open wound and a point of absolute obsession for Pittsburgh. And you have to realize this rematch is a completely different battlefield. Sure, you are still dealing with that intensely hostile Pittsburgh night environment. The terrible towels waving, the freezing Steel City air, the deafening noise on third down. But this is not the same team they beat 30-6. The Steelers' offense has been heavily revamped. And the most dangerous variable of all, a completely new regime led by head coach Mike McCarthy. This injects massive unpredictability into the matchup. Think about the huge tactical shift here. McCarthy utilizes deep West Coast offensive principles. He relies on a heavily timed, quick passing game specifically designed to neutralize an aggressive pass rush. This completely counteracts DeMeco Ryans' reliance on front four pressure. The defensive tape Houston has from last January, it's practically obsolete. Houston is walking into a highly emotional revenge game against a team with new weapons and a completely new schematic mastermind who is specifically tailored to exploit defensive aggression. Then we hit level 3, the frozen tundra.
And somehow the difficulty only continues to spike. Level 3 takes us to Green Bay in January. Look, there are very few things in professional sports as daunting as traveling to Lambeau Field in the dead of winter. The cold doesn't just affect the football, making it feel like throwing a literal cinder block. It affects the mind. It physically breaks a team's will to tackle. But the environmental factors, they might genuinely be the least of Houston's worries here. The source material highlights a really staggering development. Micah Parsons is projected to be back to full health by this exact point in the schedule.
let's break down exactly what a healthy Micah Parsons means for the Packers defense. He isn't just a standard edge rusher. He's a defensive chess piece. When you align him over the A-gap against a center or stun him outside against a right tackle in obvious passing situations, he completely shatters the offensive line's blocking calculus. His sheer presence could easily transform the Packers' defense into a top 10 unit league-wide. And then there's the offense. The legendary Toyotathon Jordan Love theory. Statistically, once the calendar flips past Thanksgiving and those late-year car commercials start airing, Love's numbers enter a totally different stratosphere. His QBR spikes, his big-time throw percentage jumps exponentially, and he reaches this unstoppable tier of play. If that surge holds true again, the Texans will be fighting a brutal multi-front war, the freezing cold, a dominant defense anchored by a generational talent, and an elite quarterback catching fire at the absolute worst possible moment. Finally, Level 4. The final boss. If you thought Green Bay was tough, this is an entirely different level of gravity. This is undoubtedly the most harrowing challenge on their entire 2026 schedule. A perfect storm is brewing in Week 16, Christmas Eve. A short week, deep in hostile Philadelphia territory. Just imagine the sheer physical and mental degradation of an NFL season by late December. Bodies are battered. A short week means there are no padded practices, only mental walkthroughs. Now imagine condensing your physical recovery time, getting onto a cross-country flight, sleeping in hotel beds away from your family on a holiday, and stepping onto the field against the most talented, intensely physical roster of these 4 opponents. You are facing a vicious Philadelphia crowd that has likely been tailgating since dawn on Christmas Eve. It is a grim, unforgiving, violently physical picture.
And then there's this number, 0. 0. That is the exact number of times the Houston Texans have beaten the Philadelphia Eagles in their entire 25-year franchise history. A quarter of a century, and not a single victory. This isn't just a fun piece of trivia, it's a historical weight. Think back to the heartbreaking collapse in 2018, or that brutal Thursday Night Football loss in 2022 where the Houston defense completely unraveled in the second half. Over 25 years spanning different eras, totally different quarterbacks, different head coaches, and not a single victory against the Midnight Green. This isn't just a football game, it is a battle against a multi-decade curse. And believe me, the psychological weight of that 0 is heavier than any playbook.
So the crucial takeaway here is weighing these seemingly insurmountable odds. Houston is battered, they are playing on a short week, and they are up against a deep playoff-level Eagles roster. Think about the specific positional matchups here. You have elite, massive defensive tackles like Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis bearing down on the interior of Houston's offensive line. It is an absolute nightmare scenario in the trenches. But is there a silver lining? Just a sliver of hope? Well, the schedule makers did throw one tiny lifeline. The Eagles will be recovering from what projects to be an incredibly brutal, physical, defensive Week 15 battle against the reigning champion Seattle Seahawks. The bruising, punishing style of the Seahawks will undoubtedly wear down the Eagles' defense just days prior. Philadelphia will be exhausted. They will be deeply bruised. It becomes a true test of who has more sheer willpower left in the tank. A playoff-level trench clash in a playoff-type environment. Which leaves us staring down the barrel of this 2026 season with one massive, looming unknown. Just think about the incredible reality of this schedule, the hyper-specific tactical preparations against Carolina in the August heat, the highly volatile divisional traps of the AFC South, the tactical revenge games against a new schematic mastermind in Pittsburgh, the freezing elements of Lambeau matched with elite playmakers, and the heavy ghosts of a 25-year curse waiting for them in Philadelphia. Will the Texans conquer the primetime lights and cement their legacy as true, undeniable contenders? Or will this grueling, physically unforgiving gauntlet finally break them? We are going to find out. Make sure you are subscribed to NFL Nexus so you do not miss our ongoing, incredibly deep coverage of this remarkable season. Like this explainer, drop a comment with your predictions, and please become a channel member to support the deep dive. Until next time, keep watching the shadows.